Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm going to ask you to do a couple of things for me and for yourselves before I begin my talk today. Number one, please remove your watches, your timepieces. Please put them away where you can't see them. Thank you very much. I'm the only one allowed to have a watch on. Number two, please don't do any thinking while I'm talking to you. You know why? Because you think too much. And if you're going to be sitting there forming judgments about me or about what I'm saying or about what hopefully the Buddha is saying through me, then you're not going to be listening. And you don't really know how to listen. And one of the reasons you don't know how to listen is that you think too much. So no judgments. It might help if you close your eyes or maybe stare into space. Allow the Buddha through me, hopefully, to plant a seed in you this morning. And as I address you, I'm going to be using the pronoun you. I'm using the pronoun you because I'm addressing you. But the pronoun you also includes John. So every time I talk about you, I'm talking about us. I am included in the you. I want to thank Michael for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today. And I don't know whether or not it's going to be a good thing or a bad thing, but I decided that today I was going to talk to you about you as sinners. Now, maybe you don't like the word sin, and you don't have to take the word sin in terms of any kind of religious connotation if that's not good for you, but I'm going to accuse you today of original sin. It is the original sin. It is basically the only sin that you are committing. But from that sin, there is this multifaceted, sinful state that you are continually in, always in, even right now. How do I know that about you? Well, I've paid a lot of attention to you. And in paying a lot of attention to you, and that's another thing about you, you never pay attention. You don't listen, you just hear. Okay? You don't look, you just see. You don't take in the scent of anything, you just smell. You don't savor, you just taste. And poor us, poor you, we don't feel, we just touch. We are numbed out in our five senses. But I decided many years ago to pay attention to you. And in paying attention to you, I discovered that you are quite hellbound. What sinners you are. And there are two reasons that I have to give to you today to let you know about that. The first reason is the following. I think that every individual beyond the age of 3 or 4 carries around behind himself or herself one of those small little red wagons. Those little pull wagons. And I can visualize every one of your pull wagons right now, nice and red and filled with your drama, your agenda, your life, all of the things that are so terribly, terribly important to you. In fact, I label that little red wagon your somebodyness. You know when you feel and you think that you are somebody. And that somebody has been given a name by some other somebodies. Your Joe or your Michael or your Francine or your Mary or your John. And that somebodyness that you carry around and pull around with you all the time, everywhere you go, is not really visible to people. But you certainly make it known to them whenever you encounter them. And even when you're not encountering them, when you're with yourself. I'll give you a typical idea of what goes on during a conversation, for example, between two people. You're with another person, and what you're doing right away is you keep turning around to get something out of that little red wagon, your somebodyness wagon. Look at me. This is who I am. This is where I went to school. These were my parents. This is how they treated me. This is how I was treasured. This is how I was abused. I live here. I own this car. I have this major. This is what I'm doing. On and on and on and on. And you're not visual when you do it, but I think that metaphorically speaking, you're continually turning away from facing the person you're talking to so that you can get your hands on something back here and shove it in their faces. You don't even look at people when you talk to them because you're too busy getting into your somebodyness pull thing behind you. You revel in the fact that you are somebody. You revel in the fact that you have a total agenda and a total drama to give to somebody all the time. The only people I haven't met who are not drama kings and queens are either Zen masters and children below the age of 3, maybe. Not only that, and I'm not a clinician, but you suffer from ADHD, ADD, small ADD, small ADHD. You don't know how to pay attention because you're too into turning around and taking out your life and giving it to somebody else. It makes you feel so good to be somebody. It makes you feel so good to be filled with you. That's the original sin. The original sin is that you think you're so important and that everybody out there is just dying to hear what you have to say about you. And the second thing that makes this all so very apparent to me is that outside of seeing, I also listen to people's conversations. You can't speak 2 sentences without using one of the following 5 pronouns, can you? I, me, my, mine, and myself. Bet you can't do it. Have a conversation with somebody. Almost the first words out of your mouth are I, or me, or my, or mine, or myself, or some variation thereon. Your drama is so apparent to other people. Is their drama apparent to you? Well, maybe if you start to pay more attention, it will be. And if you start to pay more attention, perhaps what you'll discover is that you have become so boring to other people. And you know that's true because you know in your heart of hearts that they are so boring to you. Now, maybe they're your dearest friends and you would never use that word. But while you're having a conversation with them, isn't it true you can hardly wait to turn around and get that stuff out of your little red wagon so that you can put your stuff on the table, even before they finish a sentence with their I, me's, my's, mine's, and myself's, so that you can begin a sentence with your I, me's, my's, mine's, and myself's? A rhetorical question. I sense this might be true about you. Aren't you becoming boring to yourself? You're certainly boring the hell out of other people. Aren't you clear enough and prescient enough to know that you are ultimately going, if you're not doing it right now, you're ultimately going to be boring the hell out of yourself? Is that all you can talk about? Is that all is of, what is of concern to you? Your drama, your agenda, your life? I get the feeling sometimes about people who are having a conversation, and I use the word conversation in quotes because we don't know how to talk to one another anymore. It's a kind of jousting contest. At least when I listen to 2 people talking, it's a kind of jousting contest to me. 2 bags of, blood and guts and sand rubbing up against one another in a very abrasive fashion. Let me get my stuff out there first before he or she does. And while he or she is getting his or her stuff out there and throwing it in my face, I can hardly wait until I can preempt the conversation and make a statement about me. It's the original sin. It's the sin out of which all other sins flow. The sin of somebodyness. Other people call it the sin of ego, being egocentric and narcissistic. And even if you are not one of those typically clinically egocentric or narcissistic people, you're one of those people who doesn't think very much about himself or herself, you can't put 2 and 2 together and get 4, you have a difficult time, you've gone through a lot of crap in your life, it's still all about you. Only it's about you from the negative point of view. Look at me, I'm a victim. Let me take my victimness out and put it in front of you. Look at me, how I've been abused and hurt. Please pay attention to me. This is what you do, and you know it's true. You're a sinner. My students have asked me, Dr. John, how can we stop this? And I give them some very practical things to do. But before I give you the practical things, I just want to tell you a quick little story. 2 quick little stories. Leo Biscotti was some of you may know who Leo Biscotti was. He was a professor of education at the University of Southern California. And he was at a cocktail party one day, and there was a Buddhist monk wearing his saffron robes, about, Leo says, 3 or 4 feet tall. And Leo was 6'4", very tall man. And I think the cocktail party was on the lawn somewhere at the University of Southern California, and it was a kind of reception party for this monk who was, I suppose, going to be joining the faculty. And there were about 50 people present on the lawn, and Leo was talking to the monk, and he was telling the monk all about himself. You know, I'm a professor of education here at, this university, and I've written all of these books, and I travel all around the world, and I give all of these talks and so on and so forth. And at one point, Leo said, this beautiful little monk in his saffron robe turned around, hauled off, and slapped him in the face in front of 50 people. And Leo said, here I am bleeding out of the side of my mouth, and I'm saying to this little man, I'm about twice his size, what did I say? What did I do? And he said, with all of the vehemence that little man could muster in his little tiny body, he looked up at Leo, and in front of 50 people, he shouted at him, don't walk in my clean mind with your dirty feet. And that's what you do. Shame on you. You sinners. You go around and you can hardly wait to find somebody who can be a kind of receptacle for the dirt on your feet. Let me tell you all about myself. Let me tell you about my drama. Let me tell you about my life. I'm somebody. And you know what? Your mind is as dirty as theirs because they're doing the same thing to you. They're walking in your, what used to be a clean mind, with their dirty feet. So Leo said at one point, he was talking to us here at Molloy, he said, I promise you before I came to talk to you tonight, I cleaned my feet. Jesus was with his disciples one day, and his disciples said to him, there were several of them there, good Lord, good Master, he said, the people want to know who you are. Some say you are John the Baptist, come back from the dead. Some say that you are Elijah, the prophet. And Jesus stopped them and he said, don't call me good. Only my Father in heaven is good. Who do you say I am? So when he used the pronoun me, he had a negative attached to it. Don't call me good. Imagine Jesus saying that, whether you're a Christian or not. Imagine Jesus saying that, don't call me good. Only my Father in heaven is good. And who do you say that I am? He used another pronoun. He put it on their shoulders. At one point down the road, he said to them, when you see me, you don't see me, you see the Father. Let me ask you something. When people see you, whom do they see? Do they see the somebody that you are, that you want them to see? Somebody with a small s, that small self, S in the small self. When they look at Joe, do they see Joe? When they look at Mary, do they see Mary? When they look at John, do they see John? Because if they do, we're screwing up. We're failures. And they want you, when you look at them, they want you to see Francine. They want you to see Harry. They're failures too. Sinners all. Take a look at me. Pay attention to me. It's me with a small m. Me with a small s. Myself. Jesus said, when you see me, you don't see me. When people look at you, maybe they should be seeing somebody else. When people look at you, do they see the Buddha? Because if they do, wow, you're into the capital S. Now there's a self inside of you. Boy, is there a somebody inside of you. And now you've gone from small s to capital S. When people look at you, do they see Jesus? Do they see Allah? Do they see Jehovah? Maybe none of that's important to you. Do they see the universe? Do they see emptiness? The Heart Sutra, we're talking about emptiness is form, form is emptiness. It was said of a great Zen master that when you looked into his eyes, you could see forever. He was very unconditionally accepting of you. He had very few questions to ask, if anything at all. He gave you space to be who you were and are. When you are around people, do you give them space to be? Or are you crowding that space with your drama? With your little red pull toy behind you? With your agenda? It's all about me. Charlotte Joko Beck writes a wonderful 2 books. In her first book, Everyday Zen, I can hardly wait, as I've already told you last year, to get to page 100. She says, and this is a quote, "Your life is none of your business. Your life is none of your business." Well then, Dr. John, if my life is none of my business, who the hell's business is it is? Fill in the blank, boys and girls. You're not doing a very good job with it. Why don't you let Buddha run your life? Or Jesus, or God, or the Great Spirit, or emptiness, or the universe, because you're not doing very well with it, are you? I've never known the universe to make a mistake. I've never known Buddha to be a screw-up. I've known Jesus to be terribly, terribly loving and compassionate. How you doing with all of those things? I suspect not too well. When it's all about you, love goes out the window. When it's all about you, there goes compassion. And you're making all of these mistakes. You're not looking out there, you're looking in here. And when you're looking in here, you become so crimped and cramped. And I mean, almost physically, you can see that you're down on yourself. It's I, me, mine, and myself. So when my students ask me, practically speaking, Dr. John, what can we do about this? I tell them, change the pronouns. Don't use those pronouns anymore in your conversation. Jesus put it back on them. Who do you say I am? Try, instead of I, me, my, myself, and mine, try you. Yours. Yourself. Yoursins. And you know what's going to happen? Almost physically, you're going to start to open up. Your chin will come up, your shoulders will come back, your chest will open, your belly will open, your shoulders will be open. Let's talk about us. Let's talk about the we. Let's talk about usins. Let's talk about ourselves. Let's talk about you. Let's talk about your things. Let's talk about they. Let's talk about them. And you know what happens? Expansiveness, openness. I'll bet you a dime to a dollar. You start talking to people that way, your smartphone's going to be ringing off the hook. You have to come to understand who you really are. You really are nobody. You're nothing special, says Charlotte Joko Beck. You're nobody. And when you're nobody, then you're empty. Read the Heart Sutra. Then you can be filled. You can be filled. Right now, you can't be filled. You're so full of yourself. You're disgusting. You're so filled with yourself. Aren't you disgusting yourself? If you don't believe me, and if you don't believe Buddha, listen to Emily Dickinson. I'm nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too? Then there's a pair of us. Don't tell. They'd banish us, you know. How dreary to be somebody. This is Emily talking. How dreary to be somebody. Yes, how dreary to be somebody. How public, like a frog. To tell your name the livelong day to an admiring bog. By the way, they're all boggish. So are you. You're like a frog sitting on a log at a bog. I add a little bit of something to Emily. When we started our meeting today, we got into the Mu mantra. There was a great Zen master once who was asked whether or not a dog has Buddha nature. His answer was Mu. Now, when I've seen that transliterated or translations of that, oftentimes the word no comes up, or none. So does a dog have Buddha nature? No, none. Okay? So we started today, it's wonderful, I had no idea we were going to be doing this, but we started today with the Mu mantra. When people look at you, do they see Mu? Or do they see you? Because when they see you, shame on you, they should be seeing Mu. Nothing. No. I'm empty. I can be filled now. Let me, with all apologies to Emily, I'm Mu. Who are you? Are you Mu too? Then there's a pair of us, don't tell. They banish us, we two Mus, you know. How dreary to be somebody, a non-Mu. How public, like a frog, a non-Mu. To tell your name the lifelong day to an admiring bog filled with non-Mus. I'm nobody, Mu. Who are you? Are you nobody too, Mu? When you know the problem, there's a solution. I don't like calling this a problem. I've called it a sin. We normally think about sins as problems. I've got to solve this problem. No, it's a mystery. When you are involved in a problem, it begs for a solution. When you're involved in a mystery, it begs for an existential living. You're involved in a tremendous mystery. It's the mystery of you. But live that mystery in such a way that you're ready to let it go and give it up so that you can be filled with a greater you. A greater you. All right, I'll end with this. There's a man who dies and goes to heaven, and he's talking to St. Peter, and St. Peter says, heaven is right behind that door. Congratulations, you got up here, but you have to go and you have to knock on that door, and when that door is open to you, you'll go into heaven. So the man is, he's just so excited, and he goes up to the door, and he knocks on the door, and he hears the voice, and it's obviously the voice of God. Who's there? Oh, dear God, it's John. I'm here. I'm up here in heaven. I want to come through the door and be there. And God says, get out of here. I don't want to see you. I don't want to hear from you. John comes back the next day, if there's a day in heaven, knocks on the door. Who's there? Oh, dear God, it's me again. Here I am. It's John. I want to be in there. Open the door. Please let me in. Get away from me. Get away from you, slime. This goes on for years and years and years and years and years, if there are years in heaven. And at one point, John is just so tired, he comes up to the door and he knocks on the door. And he hears the voice, who's there? It's you, God. I want to come in. You're here. Click. The original sin is that you don't know who you really are. And it's about time you grew up and started to act as you really are. And live as you really are. Stop playing lowball with your life. You are called to be perfect. I'm assuming on some level that's what this Sangha is all about every Sunday morning. Don't worry about arriving. Just stay in the process. Stay in the process. Keep emptying yourself. Come to Mu. Come to you.